Welcome to TradeTheMBI.com. This is John's report. It's for the 3rd of August, and well, we ended the month pretty much where we've been all along. We've been in this bit of a soft stretch with the steel short-term buyers. It hasn't been enough to really throw things off. We've really maintained kind of a flat line between DOC Red and Cyan, which is shorts versus the power longs, and it's been kind of a neutral setup given the fact we've had rising gold has led to just this slow uptake. Of course, we are reaching highs. We have a lower shakeout. That's going to have to pump up. Otherwise, we've got a divergence, which would lead to a little bit more of a decline going in there. Correspondingly, you can see from the uptick here with the Power Mo cross, really not changed at all. And we're not even seeing a spike up. In fact, if we see a magenta spike and a green separation, much like here, that's usually when you get your up moves. So that's kind of what I look for when these two meet, and then the separation, because separation usually indicates the beginnings of much stronger activity to the upside. Conversely, when they're separated and moving back towards each other is usually when you get softness and contraction, which corresponds to what we saw right here as these two began to narrow down. Not too unrelated to what we would see from steel crossing below Cyan. In this particular case, it's the exact same thing from the NASDAQ standpoint. And the NASDAQ exactly doing what the S&P is doing, only from a stronger standpoint, as you can see. Complete cyan under red rejection with green rising. Not the short-term steel buyers, but steady shakeout. So big difference between the strength, even though they're looking correspondingly similar. The NASDAQ is clearly the stronger market right now. And of course the euro from its standpoint has been in a monumental rise, and simply because of the evaluation of the US dollar, and it's what the Fed wants. This promotes at least some trade. It also helps the S&P stocks that are euro-based, which is quite a few. We can see it trailing off here, though, as it eases off from some of this extreme, and as long as it's below the negative 13 with steel, we would expect some of this positive extreme to begin to fill. Let's see if it has any further legs than that. And oil, a little bit softer simply because of the weak demand situation until the U.S. improves. I don't know why I didn't have the pink bar turned on that one. Of course, gold back to its highs. It should have another run once the steel gets above the negative 13.5. Yes, all been under positive extremes, so on a signaling of significant growth with no inflation would certainly be enough to drive gold prices back down. That's not going to happen unless central banks get involved. In this particular case, they're not doing that. So from an intraday standpoint, this is looking at PNT2. Scroll back here a ways to the beginning of it. It was a pretty good size volume day, beginning all the way from here, and it was pretty much a cascade lower. Every time we were getting buy configurations, they were happening with no steel reset. So even though you get even the Power 2 reading combined with dip of orange, in this particular case, just couldn't get started, and then you had the steel cross with the orange above, and that's usually the death nail to it, to flip, and that's exactly what happened. It caved down. Did reset a little bit further, but again, the closest you had to a reset was the steel popping above the 13.5. Produced a lot of malaise until the gold started rising in between there, and that steady shakeout was still enough to just start bringing it up, but it was just an awkward slow rise from that shakeout to getting towards the positive run there, and then right at the peak, positive extreme, and what did that do? Filled right back in to give another short signal. That led us to the new lows right before end of day, and as we got there, we were starting to get the buys because you had the yellow going there, and I'll show in the other chart the configuration from the Power Mo 2, which I just sent out as part of the new indicator functions in that. Crossover with rising, at the same time you have the rising red. That was the beginning of it. It still produced a new low within it, but turned around and produced turnaround buy setup, and then of course you had sign and move under red, and that was the continuation run for the remainder of the day, basically erasing all of the negative move. And even in the pre-market here, we're already making new highs going up. If we look at the other setup program, this is what it looks like. So this is the crossover of the Power Mo with the orange dip, red above the white setup, and still adding some additional conditions to some of these, particularly setting up the cells so we see how many additional buys would take place within where we get a pop, and then we know it's not going to survive. But in this particular case, that's what it looks like. Plain and simple. If we even slide back further in the day, this is the previous day's pop, so it had gone red there. But as you can see, some over here where we have more of the cell conditions need to be set up that handles. No steel reset. It's always a problem, always will be, because it's just an indication that you don't have all of the players that are needed to drive continuation runs in place. And that usually creates soft weakness. What you see here are the long algo, short algo, because it's an interesting correlation with those that while it stays in that, even in the upruns, until you get complete crossover from a longer standpoint. But we can see those bottoms happening sooner, and then particularly when we get the steel reset from a buy configuration, that usually tends to be all that's needed for it. So putting all of those details into place, and we'll have that set up. Actually was having my alerts going off as well to point those out. I can show that again. So here it is from an alert configuration, what it's sending to, and then the message that it sends. And it's a neat little configuration. I mean, of course, this can be completely edited to whatever the desired text reading is. I had it looping continuously just to see that it would continue to do it, and so far it does exactly what it's supposed to do from that configuration. So it's good to see that. And of course I sent that language along with the functions for the various indicator readings, so you can literally create, using that, your own preference as far as what you want it to read. What indicator readings? I mean, we don't have the Morganacci line showing on this one, but you can certainly even include a value of that in any one of those, or any other variable that you assign would show up on the email if you add it in there, which makes it completely relevant and much better than it had been, since even when I had the MBI alerts from way back, we really were limited as to what it would send. Now we have complete capabilities, so who knows, we may be seeing those back again, just because now it's much more functional, and convert them into an app that just gives you the signal and you're all set to go. As always though, trade well. We'll talk again later, and of course anything relevant we put on the Skype chat.